Hello, Wanderer. My name is the Sleepy Storyteller. And tonight I've prepared something quiet for you. Something strange. Something that breathes in the silence between your thoughts. You're safe here as long as the lights stay on. So tuck in, rest your head, and listen closely. Because this one doesn't just want to be heard. It wants to be remembered. It started with a feeling. A weight I couldn't name. Like walking into a room where someone had just left, but the air hasn't returned to normal yet. Like a presence pressing down on your shoulders, not hostile exactly, just watchful. I was working late that night. The kind of job where people call you by mistake more than on purpose. One of those customer service desks tucked away in a company no one really remembers applying to. And yet we all ended up there. Sleepy-eyed, caffeine-addled, and a little too comfortable with silence. Around 1:17 a.m., the power blinked off for a moment. Not in the building, just around me. My computer stayed on. The desk lamp flickered. But behind me, all the lights in the hallway shut off as if someone had thrown a switch. I turned. Empty. But something had changed. The hallway felt longer. The shadows stretched differently. And for the briefest moment, so brief I almost dismissed it, I thought I saw a flicker. A figure. Just at the edge of vision. Too still. Too vertical. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Just fatigue. Overwork. That's when my computer made a noise. Not a beep. Not an error. A whisper. Just one breathy syllable. Closer. I stared at the screen. Nothing unusual. No windows open. No audio playing. And yet, the silence was heavier now. Later that night at home, I noticed the wallpaper in my hallway had started to peel. Now, I don't have wallpaper. My apartment walls are painted. Smooth. Cream-colored. But near the baseboards, there it was. Edges curling up like old parchment. Printed with a pattern I didn't recognize, small dark houses on a gray-blue background. Each house had no door, just windows. Windows that were pitch black. I leaned in to touch it and I swear, it was warm. When I tried to peel it off, the paper hissed. Like steam escaping a teapot. And I pulled my hand back, heart thudding against my ribs. I didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, the wallpaper was gone. Smooth paint again. As if nothing had ever been there. Except, at the corner of the hallway floor was something that hadn't been there before. A key. Not modern. Not even particularly old. Just raw. The kind of key that felt personal. Heavy. Like it knew which lock it belonged to. Like it had waited for me. There was a number etched into the metal. 237 Graymire Hill. I shouldn't have gone. I know that now. But curiosity is a subtle thing. It doesn't scream. It invites. So I packed a flashlight, a notebook, and that strange little key, and I started walking. The walk to Graymire Hill took longer than it should have. Each turn felt unfamiliar, though I'd lived in this city for 6 years. The air grew colder the farther I went. Not just chilly, dense. Heavy. Like walking underwater. And then, there it was. A house. 3 stories tall, though it felt like it might stretch farther if you looked at it too long. Windows like eyes. Paint peeled not from neglect, but from disuse. As though the house had grown tired of pretending to be normal. There was a light in the top window. Soft. Flickering. As if it was waiting for someone to notice. I stood there a long time before stepping closer. Each footfall on the gravel sounded louder than it should have. No birds. No cars. No wind. Just the rhythmic crunch of my footsteps, and the faint creaking of the house settling in place, like bones cracking after a long sleep. At the porch I paused. The door was slightly ajar. The key was warm in my hand. I shouldn't have gone inside. But the house had already let me in. The door groaned as I pushed it open, the sound not mechanical but almost organic, like something clearing its throat in the dark. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light behind me, hesitant to follow as I stepped inside. The air changed immediately. It didn't just smell musty, it was thick, as though it had been holding its breath for a very long time and had only just noticed I was there. The floor creaked beneath me in a rhythm that didn't match my steps. 1, 2, pause. 1, pause. Creak, creak. As if the house was walking with me, or mimicking me. I called out, softly, maybe just to break the silence. Hello. My voice came back wrong. Not an echo exactly. It repeated, delayed, slightly twisted, like someone imitating me a beat too late. The entry hall was lined with paintings. At first, they looked like ordinary oil portraits, stern-looking men and women in outdated clothing, eyes dull with the passage of time. But as I walked past, I noticed something. Each painting had the same background. Not similar. Identical. A room with yellow wallpaper, patterned with those same little houses I'd seen peeling in my own hallway. Some had cracks. Some were torn. Some dripped something dark. And in every single one, in the corner of the room behind the painted figure, was a small window. And in the window, something looking in. I moved faster. The living room smelled faintly of burnt wood and old lilacs. The furniture was covered with thick white sheets, though they were too clean for a house this forgotten. As if someone had just finished dusting, and then disappeared. There was a fireplace, cold now but with gray ash still in the grate. Above it, a mirror hung crooked. It wasn't dusty. In fact, it was the only thing in the room that gleamed, as if someone polished it daily. I glanced at it. My reflection blinked a moment too late. My breath caught. I stepped away quickly and the mirror rippled, like the surface of water touched by an unseen hand. Behind the shimmer, something moved. Not in the room. In the reflection. The shape. Tall. Too tall. Bent at the neck like it had to fold itself to fit within the house. No features, just the suggestion of a grin. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I already knew there was nothing there. And yet the mirror smiled wider. I pressed on deeper into the house. The hallway stretched out in both directions. I picked one. Each door I passed had something etched into the wood. Words scratched hastily, letters uneven. Some were simple phrases like "stay out" or "not a room." One said, "the floor bites." Another, "this one forgot their name." I stopped at the end of the hall where a door stood slightly ajar. A light flickered within. No footsteps. No sound. Just the faint hum of a light bulb buzzing like an angry fly. Inside was a child's bedroom. At least it had been once. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing more of those strange little houses. A crib stood in the corner, long abandoned, its mattress curled like a dried leaf. On the floor were toys, not broken but wrong. Dolls with their eyes sewn shut. A jack-in-the-box that slowly unwound itself without being touched, the music just slightly out of tune. A stuffed rabbit whose ears had been removed, stitched into its chest like a second pair of arms. And on the walls, crayon drawings. Lots of them. Stick figures drawn with frantic, uneven hands. Some standing. Some lying down. Some upside down. Above one cluster, a message in a child's shaky scrawl. "She watches through the roof." I backed out slowly, leaving the door as I found it, just ajar. The hallway behind me was darker now. Not nighttime dark. Intentional dark. As if the house was turning out its lights, one at a time. I should have left then, but I heard something. A whisper. Soft. Familiar. My name. And it came from upstairs. I don't remember choosing to climb the staircase, but my hand was on the banister before I could stop myself. The steps were carpeted, but I felt the wood beneath, and the pulse. Yes, the stairs had a rhythm, like a heartbeat, or a countdown. At the top of the stairs, the air changed again, heavy with perfume and mildew. The hallway here was narrower, the ceiling lower. A single bulb flickered overhead, illuminating a trail of small wet footprints. There, leading to the final door at the end. My hand shook as I turned the knob. Inside was a study. Dust-choked, smelling of forgotten paper and cold tea. The desk was cluttered with yellowing pages, string-tied bundles, and one small item that caught the light. A photograph. It was me, sitting in my apartment, smiling. Only, I wasn't smiling that day. I remembered, that was the day I lost power. That was the day I found the key. That was the day the wallpaper peeled. And in the background of the photo, behind my shoulder, was a shadow. Tall, bent, grinning. There was a sound behind me. The creak of weight shifting on old wood. I turned, and the room was empty. But the mirror on the wall was no longer reflecting me. It showed a staircase, a hallway, and someone climbing. They were almost at the top. I ran, down the stairs, through the hall, out the front door. The sunlight hit my face, morning light. I had been inside for only an hour, and yet the sky was pale and gray with dawn. I never found the house again. Not on maps, not on foot. But the next day my wallpaper began peeling again. A different pattern this time. Rows of mirrors, each one reflecting something I haven't seen yet. For a while I pretended it was over. I told myself the house had been a trick of the mind, a dream I mistook for memory. Maybe I'd fallen asleep and wandered into a feverish spiral of half-truths and imagined spaces. I told myself that, again and again, until the smell started. It crept in one morning, soft and sour. like damp wallpaper left to rot in the corner of an attic. Not strong enough to notice at first, just enough to linger. I cleaned. I scrubbed. I opened every window, but the air stayed heavy. Then came the noises. Not loud, just faint tapping. At first I thought it was the pipes, or maybe my upstairs neighbor. Only, I live on the top floor. The taps grew more deliberate. 3 quick knocks, then silence. Sometimes it came from the wall behind my bed. Other times from inside the wardrobe. Once, just once, from beneath the floorboards, directly under where I sat. Still I waited. I told myself again, this is nothing. But the house was patient. It knew how to wait. I began dreaming of staircases. Long ones. Too long. The kind that twisted, turned, folded back on themselves like paper. In the dream, I never reached the top. Something always pulled me back. Not with hands, but with gravity that didn't feel like my own. I'd wake up, out of breath. And always to find something new in my home slightly changed. The kitchen tiles, different. The angle of the door frame, crooked. One morning, the mirror in my bathroom no longer showed my toothbrush, though I could see it clearly beside me. I started marking things. Little pencil notches in the walls. Scratches under chairs. A tiny dot beneath each switch. Every day something had shifted. And then, one night, I found another door. Not outside. Not in a dream. Inside my apartment. It was just there. Between the hallway and my bedroom. A door I knew had never existed. No hinges. No handle. Just a pale wooden slab flush with the wall. It was covered in wallpaper. The pattern was familiar. Rows and rows of eyes. All closed. I stared at it for hours. My breath slowing. My heart beating in a rhythm I didn't recognize as mine. Then, around midnight, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The eyes on the wallpaper began to open. One by one. Each blink slow, deliberate. What? I moved out the next morning. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? What could I say? But the house, it doesn't live in just one place anymore. I thought I left it behind. I thought I could outrun it. But now when I walk the city, I see it. In windows. In cracks on sidewalks. In reflections that don't quite match. It's spreading. Slowly. Quietly. One breath at a time. And I think it's learning. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after I moved. I left behind everything. The furniture. The dishes. Even the photo albums. Just the idea of bringing something from that place into the new apartment made my skin itch. I imagined the rot buried in the seams of a chair cushion. A single thread of that wallpaper curling inside a cardboard box. The way a smile can hide teeth too sharp to see in passing. My new apartment was smaller. Empty. Sterile. I chose it for the windows. 6 of them. All wide. All facing the street. I like that. I like being able to look out and see people. Cars. Lampposts. Movement. It felt like proof the world was still real. The first week I felt better. Not safe, but untouched. Then the mail started arriving. Letters with no stamp. No return address. Just my name written in cramped black ink. Inside were drawings. Crayon scribbles. Childish. Wobbly. Wrong. One showed a house. Windows too tall. Door too short. A chimney with smoke that curled down, not up. Another showed 4 stick figures. Too big. Too small. Each with a smile that stretched over the whole face, wide and open like a cut. But it was the third one that made my blood slow. It was just a staircase, endless, spiral. And on each step, a face, my face, over and over, crying, screaming, grinning, hollow. I burned the letters, all of them. But the next night, one reappeared on my pillow, folded in half. Inside was a single sentence, written in perfect cursive. You brought the door with you. I wanted to scream. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came. Not even a whisper. I pressed my back to the wall. Felt the plaster cool against my skin. But it wasn't plaster. Not anymore. It was wallpaper. Rows and rows of closed eyes, just waiting. And somewhere beneath the hum of city life and distant sirens, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Like a knock from the other side of a dream. Only I was awake. Wide awake. In the house, it was coming home. I stopped using mirrors. It wasn't sudden. It started with little things. My reflection blinking out of sync. My mouth staying still when I was sure I'd whispered. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. Residual fear. Trauma from what happened in that house. But mirrors don't lie. Unless something's behind them. It got worse the night I turned off the lights and saw myself still standing. Perfectly still. perfectly upright, in the black mirror of my living room window. Only I was already lying in bed. Heart hammering, I sat up, and the figure in the glass didn't move. It just stood there watching. I knew I saw it. I left the lights on after that, but the lights started flickering too. During the day, I tried to distract myself. Coffee shops, parks, crowded sidewalks. But the world began to feel like cardboard scenery, something set up around me, not for me. I'd pass people on the street and swear they were the same face, slightly altered. Again and again. One woman in a red coat passed me 5 times in 1 hour. Same face, same stride, same empty smile. I confronted her on the 3rd pass. "Do I know you?" She stopped walking. The smile stayed frozen, stretched, too wide. Then she whispered something so quiet I thought I imagined it. "We've been inside you since the stairs." And then she was gone. Just gone. Like someone flipping off a switch. I started checking my apartment for changes. Tiny shifts. An outlet where there wasn't one before. My kettle moved half an inch to the left, every morning. Once I swore I closed the blinds before bed. But I woke up and they were open, and the window was unlocked. I don't remember unlocking it. I started leaving messages for myself. Scraps of paper. Notes tucked into books. The floor creaks in a different rhythm. Don't speak aloud after midnight. Do not trust the phone. One night my phone rang anyway. No number. Just a black screen and the word, home. I let it ring. It rang for 17 minutes. When it stopped, there was a voicemail. A single sound. Breathing. But it wasn't mine. It was heavier. Slower. Like lungs too large for a human chest. It ended with a whisper that didn't sound like a voice at all. It sounded like a wall trying to speak. "Come back. We miss your shape." I don't know how much time has passed now. The clocks don't work here anymore. Sometimes it's light outside when I wake up. Sometimes it's night. Once I stepped out the door and the hallway was a field. Black grass. White sky. No horizon. I stepped back in, closed the door, and stood still for hours. The air inside the apartment was too quiet, like it was listening. And I realized it had grown with me. The house. It never stayed behind. It just wore something new. There comes a point when even fear begins to feel familiar. Not comforting, never that, but habitual. Like a background hum. Like the ticking of a clock you thought was broken. That's what it became. A rhythm. A presence. A second skin. It started speaking in ways I could understand. Not with words. Not at first. With small things. The way the wallpaper peeled into shapes that looked like faces. Not grotesque, but pleading. The way my old family photo, which I'd packed away years ago, showed up on the kitchen table. Except my mother's eyes had been scratched out, and my childhood dog was smiling with too many teeth. I began to hear a knocking inside the fridge. Not on the door. Inside it. 3 slow taps. Then silence. I opened it once. Nothing. Just an apple with a bite taken out of it. Not mine. I don't even buy apples. The house asked questions, I think, in its own way. It rearranged my furniture in geometric patterns while I slept. Circles. Spirals. Once, a shape I had to Google. A sigil. Babylonian. I sat on the couch and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The lamp flickered once, and then my phone screen lit up on its own. A single message. "We remember your shape." My shape. As if I'd fit into something. Or filled something. I thought maybe it was all in my mind. So I left. Or tried to. I packed a bag. I locked the door. I called a cab. And when I got to the train station, the timetable board blinked and flickered. Every destination, every single one, changed to the same word. Home. My ticket? It printed fine. But it didn't say a city. It said, return. I asked the man at the counter what it meant. He smiled without blinking and said, "You live close, don't you?" I walked away. The cab I'd come in was gone. So was the road. Just white fog. And behind me, my apartment key was in my hand again. But the keyring had changed. It used to say, "Bless this mess." Now it read, "Room 0. That night I stopped fighting. I sat on the floor. No lights. No candles. Just me. And the walls. They were breathing. Slowly. I watched the paint bubble like skin. And the shadows beneath the door started to take shape. Long, slender. Curious. They didn't come in. They just watched. Like they were waiting for me to fall asleep. So I didn't. I still haven't. It wants me quiet. It wants me calm. It wants me open. But I'm learning. If I can learn its rules, maybe I can write my own. Or maybe I can ask it questions. Next time it listens, I'll try. I'll ask what it remembers, and why it needs me to remember too. I started forgetting things. Small things at first. Where I left my keys. Whether I had eaten. What day it was. Normal stress, I told myself. Trauma. Nothing supernatural. Until I started forgetting myself. One morning, I looked into the mirror. Yes, I'd gone back to it, desperate to feel normal, and I didn't recognize the face. It was mine, of course. The same curve of jaw, the faint scar above my lip. But the expression wasn't one I remembered wearing. Cold. Detached. Like a stranger using my body to peer into the world. I blinked. So did it. But for a moment, I swear it looked bored with me. Like I wasn't performing well enough for it anymore. That's when I noticed the note, taped to the corner of the mirror in handwriting that was unmistakably mine. Read. Stop looking at her. You're only making it easier. Who is her? I wanted to rip the note down, burn it, pretend it never existed. But instead, I placed a second note beside it. Who are you? When I came back later, the answer was there. Written in thicker, heavier ink. You were never alone in there. I staggered back, hit the dresser behind me. My hand caught the corner of a photo frame, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was supposed to be a picture of me and my sister. But only one girl stood in the frame now. And it wasn't me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the bathroom, door locked, lights flickering. I wrapped myself in towels like they were armor. From what I didn't know, the apartment was quiet. No breathing. No creaking floors. No strange knocks. And somehow, that made it worse. I remembered what it felt like to be in the Miller's house. The hum in the walls. The shifting spaces. The way the air felt like it was pressing against your skin just a little too much. My home now felt the same. Even when I closed my eyes, I could feel it watching. Hoping that I'd stop resisting. I started having dreams again. But these weren't the chasing kind. These were memories that weren't mine. I'd wake up with names in my head. Foreign names. Places I'd never been. Descriptions of rooms I'd never entered. One dream in particular stayed with me. A long corridor lined with doors. Behind each door, a child was sleeping. And something waited beside them. Tall. Pale. Smiling too wide. Watching them sleep like it was memorizing their shape. I tried to open one of the doors. And the creature turned its head toward me, slowly, too slowly, and whispered, "This is how we learn." I woke up screaming. But the scream wasn't mine. It was coming from inside the apartment. Low, soft, distant, like someone was screaming through cotton. I searched every room. Nothing. No one. Until I opened the closet. There was no floor inside. Just stairs. Descending. Impossible stairs. Lit by a light I couldn't trace. I slammed the door shut. And it disappeared. As if it had never been there. But later that night, when I brushed my teeth, the mirror fogged with steam. And when I wiped it clean, words were written there in that same thick ink. The house is always where you are. It's in your voice now. I barely speak anymore. I'm afraid of what might answer. There's something terrifying about silence, not the comforting hush of nightfall, but that other kind. The kind that follows you around, filling in spaces that used to be warm. It settles in the pauses between words, in the stillness after laughter fades. And lately, that kind of silence is everywhere. It started small. A neighbor who used to wave every morning suddenly just stared. Not in a threatening way, no. Just a little too long, as if trying to remember how waving worked. Then there was the barista who made my coffee every Friday, the one with the crooked smile and band-aids on her fingers. She'd always chat about her dog or the weird customers. But one day she stopped meeting my eyes. Handed me my drink without a word. I thought maybe she was having a bad day. But the next week she was gone. Replaced by someone who looked like her, but didn't blink often enough. I started noticing more of them. People who looked almost right. They wore the same clothes, stood in the same doorways, even laughed at the same jokes. But the timing was off. A beat too slow. A grin that held just a second too long. It's subtle, like a damp smell you only catch when the wind shifts. You tell yourself it's nothing. But it is something. Something creeping. The mail started arriving without postmarks. The same gray van drove down my street every morning at 3:17 a.m., headlights off. I watched once from behind the curtain. It didn't stop. It just coasted slowly like it was watching me. The birds are quieter now. Not gone, just muted. They perch in rows on the telephone wires, facing the same direction, unmoving. Like sentries. Sometimes they twitch in unison. I called my sister. We hadn't spoken in months. She picked up, said hello, and then nothing. No background noise. No breathing. Just silence. I said her name. She repeated mine in a tone that didn't belong to her. And then a click. The rot is not loud. It doesn't kick down the door. It seeps inch by inch into the bones of things. It slips between the floorboards, curls under the edges of the rug, weaves itself into routines until nothing feels quite right anymore. The supermarket is always playing the same song now. One I've never heard before but know by heart. The children don't run anymore. They just stand on the playground, swaying slightly, their eyes too wide, their mouths slightly open. I try to keep my head down, smile, pretend I don't see, but it's getting harder. Because the world looks the same, but it isn't. And maybe it never was. There is a point where denial stops protecting you. Where it cracks under the weight of too many near misses, too many impossible glances, and you finally whisper, something is wrong. The rot wasn't dramatic. It didn't scream or bleed or crawl. It settled, quietly, elegantly, like fog curling into the corners of your house, like dust that no amount of cleaning could remove. It lived in the in-between moments, the hesitation before a neighbor returned your greeting, the flicker of motion behind closed curtains, the cold smear left on your skin after shaking someone's hand. The rot was polite, always. That made it worse. Because when things smile at you with too many teeth and offer you tea in chipped porcelain cups, it becomes harder to run, harder to scream. It's difficult to accuse someone of monstrosity when they say please and thank you, when they fold their laundry and walk their dog. I kept a notebook at first, a habit from childhood, back when nightmares felt like clues. I started jotting down what I saw, what I heard, what didn't fit. Pages filled faster than I expected. January 5th, Mrs. Halvorson's face didn't move when she laughed. Her mouth opened, sound came out, but her cheeks stayed flat. No creases, no emotion. January 12th, the grocery store had only one song on repeat again. Lyrics sounded like a language I don't know. I asked the cashier. She said, "We don't have music." January 17th, woke to the smell of burnt sugar. Windows were closed. Stove off. The air buzzed with something old. I thought maybe I was spiraling. Stress, isolation, lack of sleep. The usual culprits. I tried grounding techniques. Meditation. Spoke to a therapist online who told me gently to sit with the feeling, not the story. But it was the story that kept unfolding around me. Like I had opened the wrong book and was being dragged chapter by chapter into a narrative that didn't care if I believed it. One night, I walked the neighborhood just to move. My legs ached for motion, my thoughts louder in stillness. That's when I noticed the houses. They were breathing. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. I mean literally. Curtains puffing in and out in rhythm. Lights dimming and brightening like a pulse. A low hum vibrating through the pavement. I stepped closer to one. The Jenkins house. The one with the rose bushes and perfect hedges. Their lawn was glistening, wet though it hadn't rained in days. The walls shimmered. Not visibly. It was more like the house was a mirage, vibrating at a frequency just beyond comprehension. From the second floor window, someone watched me. It wasn't Mr. Jenkins. I went home. I closed every curtain, turned off every light, sat in the bathtub because it was the furthest point from any window. I stayed there until morning. You start to adjust even to that, to the dread, to the new rules. You walk faster, avoid eye contact, mumble your greetings. But the rot doesn't reward obedience. It notices you noticing, and that is when it begins to lean closer. Mail arrived in bundles now, all white envelopes, no return addresses. Inside were blank pages soaked faintly in some oily residue that smelled like mildew and iron. I stopped opening them, started burning them in the sink. The smoke stung my eyes. I stopped seeing cars come and go. People appeared on sidewalks and vanished around corners, but I never saw their beginnings or endings. Like film scenes cut from a reel. And the birds had begun to whisper. I thought maybe I was the last one left. The last real person anyway, until I met Layla. But Layla's story is different. We'll get to her. First, you have to understand how deep the rot went. How it dug its fingers into memories, into time itself. Because the moment you look too long at something twisted into the shape of normal, it looks right back. And the rot never forgets a face. There is a point where denial stops protecting you. Where it cracks under the weight of too many near misses, too many impossible glances, and you finally whisper, something is wrong. The rot wasn't dramatic. It didn't scream or bleed or crawl. It settled, quietly, elegantly, like fog curling into the corners of your house, like dust that no amount of cleaning could remove. It lived in the in-between moments, the hesitation before a neighbor returned your greeting, the flicker of motion behind closed curtains, The cold smear left on your skin after shaking someone's hand. The rot was polite. Always. That made it worse. Because when things smile at you with too many teeth and offer you tea in chipped porcelain cups, it becomes harder to run. Harder to scream. It's difficult to accuse someone of monstrosity when they say please and thank you. When they fold their laundry and walk their dog. I kept a notebook at first. A habit from childhood, back when nightmares felt like clues. I started jotting down what I saw, what I heard, what didn't fit. Pages filled faster than I expected. January 5th. Mrs. Halvorson's face didn't move when she laughed. Her mouth opened, sound came out, but her cheeks stayed flat. No creases. No emotion. January 12th. The grocery store had only one song on repeat again. Lyrics sounded like a language I don't know. I asked the cashier. She said, "We don't have music." January 17th. Woke to the smell of burnt sugar. Windows were closed. Stove off. The air buzzed with something old. I thought maybe I was spiraling. Stress, isolation, lack of sleep. The usual culprits. I tried grounding techniques. Meditation. Spoke to a therapist online who told me gently to sit with the feeling, not the story. But it was the story that kept unfolding around me. Like I had opened the wrong book and was being dragged chapter by chapter into a narrative that didn't care if I believed it. One night, I walked the neighborhood just to move. My legs ached for motion, my thoughts louder in stillness. That's when I noticed the houses. They were breathing. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. I mean literally. Curtains puffing in and out in rhythm. Lights dimming and brightening like a pulse. A low hum vibrating through the pavement. I stepped closer to one. The Jenkins house. The one with the rose bushes and perfect hedges. Their lawn was glistening, wet though it hadn't rained in days. The walls shimmered. Not visibly. It was more like the house was a mirage, vibrating at a frequency just beyond comprehension. From the second-floor window, someone watched me. It wasn't Mr. Jenkins. I went home. I closed every curtain, turned off every light, sat in the bathtub because it was the furthest point from any window. I stayed there until morning. You start to adjust even to that, to the dread, to the new rules. You walk faster, avoid eye contact, mumble your greetings. But the rot doesn't reward obedience. It notices you noticing, and that is when it begins to lean closer. Mail arrived in bundles now, all white envelopes. No return addresses. Inside were blank pages soaked faintly in some oily residue that smelled like mildew and iron. I stopped opening them, started burning them in the sink. The smoke stung my eyes. I stopped seeing cars come and go. People appeared on sidewalks and vanished around corners, but I never saw their beginnings or endings. Like film scenes cut from a reel. And the birds had begun to whisper. I thought maybe I was the last one left. The last real person anyway. Until I met Layla. But Layla's story is different. We'll get to her. First, you have to understand how deep the rot went. How it dug its fingers into memories, into time itself. Because the moment you look too long at something twisted into the shape of normal, it looks right back. And the rot never forgets a face. There is a point where denial stops protecting you. Where it cracks under the weight of too many near misses, too many impossible glances, and you finally whisper, something is wrong. The rot wasn't dramatic. It didn't scream or bleed or crawl. It settled, quietly, elegantly, like fog curling into the corners of your house, like dust that no amount of cleaning could remove. It lived in the in-between moments, the hesitation before a neighbor returned your greeting, the flicker of motion behind closed curtains, the cold smear left on your skin after shaking someone's hand. The rot was polite. Always. That made it worse. Because when things smile at you with too many teeth and offer you tea in chipped porcelain cups, it becomes harder to run. Harder to scream. It's difficult to accuse someone of monstrosity when they say please and thank you. When they fold their laundry and walk their dog. I kept a notebook at first. A habit from childhood, back when nightmares felt like clues. I started jotting down what I saw, what I heard, what didn't fit. Pages filled faster than I expected. January 5th. Mrs. Halvorson's face didn't move when she laughed. Her mouth opened, sound came out, but her cheeks stayed flat. No creases. No emotion. January 12th. The grocery store had only one song on repeat again. Lyrics sounded like a language I don't know. I asked the cashier. She said, "We don't have music." January 17th. Woke to the smell of burnt sugar. Windows were closed. Stove off. The air buzzed with something old. I thought maybe I was spiraling. Stress, isolation, lack of sleep. The usual culprits. I tried grounding techniques. Meditation. Spoke to a therapist online who told me gently to sit with the feeling, not the story. But it was the story that kept unfolding around me. Like I had opened the wrong book and was being dragged chapter by chapter into a narrative that didn't care if I believed it. One night, I walked the neighborhood just to move. My legs ached for motion, my thoughts louder in stillness. That's when I noticed the houses. They were breathing. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. I mean literally. Curtains puffing in and out in rhythm. Lights dimming and brightening like a pulse. A low hum vibrating through the pavement. I stepped closer to one. The Jenkins house. The one with the rose bushes and perfect hedges. Their lawn was glistening, wet though it hadn't rained in days. The walls shimmered. Not visibly. It was more like the house was a mirage, vibrating at a frequency just beyond comprehension. From the second-floor window, someone watched me. It wasn't Mr. Jenkins. I went home. I closed every curtain, turned off every light, sat in the bathtub because it was the furthest point from any window. I stayed there until morning. You start to adjust even to that, to the dread, to the new rules. You walk faster, avoid eye contact, mumble your greetings. But the rot doesn't reward obedience. It notices you noticing, and that is when it begins to lean closer. Mail arrived in bundles now, all white envelopes. No return addresses. Inside were blank pages soaked faintly in some oily residue that smelled like mildew and iron. I stopped opening them, started burning them in the sink. The smoke stung my eyes. I stopped seeing cars come and go. People appeared on sidewalks and vanished around corners, but I never saw their beginnings or endings. Like film scenes cut from a reel. And the birds had begun to whisper. I thought maybe I was the last one left. The last real person anyway. Until I met Layla. But Layla's story is different. We'll get to her. First, you have to understand how deep the rot went. How it dug its fingers into memories, into time itself. Because the moment you look too long at something twisted into the shape of normal, it looks right back. And the rot never forgets a face. Layla had always felt like a guest in her own life. Someone watching from the edges, pretending to belong to a world that never quite made space for her. Even before the Millers and their quiet suburban terror, even before the strange book of interdimensional horrors and the creatures behind human faces, there had been signs. Not loud ones. Subtle, creeping signs. As a child, she used to stare out her bedroom window long after her parents had gone to sleep. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, surrounded by hedges that always seemed to shift shape in the moonlight. At night, the neighborhood grew too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. And sometimes, just sometimes, Layla swore she could hear voices carried on the wind. Not whispers, not human. It was like the air itself was trying to speak. She learned not to tell anyone. Kids laughed. Teachers frowned. Her parents gave each other nervous looks when they thought she wasn't watching. So she said nothing. She smiled. She studied hard. She learned to fold herself small, make herself palatable, invisible. But some part of her always watched the shadows, because she knew deep down the shadows were watching her. The night she fled the Miller house, breathless and blinking back tears beneath a sky that looked too calm, too perfect, something inside her changed. Not just fear. Not even just survival. There was a slow awakening. A sense that what she had stumbled upon wasn't new at all, but rather something ancient that she had been brushing up against her entire life. At first, she tried to go back to normal. The police reports, the skeptical glances, the bland reassurances that the Millers were perfectly lovely people. She tried. She really did. But the signs were everywhere now. In the bakery 2 blocks down, where the woman behind the counter never blinked, Layla counted. In the school playground, where the same 3 children played the same game every single afternoon without variation. In her own reflection, which began to feel delayed, like a memory lagging just behind the present. And then the dreams returned. Vivid, aching dreams. Of a place made of cold stone and bone-white trees that grew upside down from a crimson sky. Of voices, hundreds of them, crying out in a language that scraped across her mind like rusted metal. And always, in every dream, she saw the book. The Convergence. Bound in cracked leather. Pages that turned on their own. Symbols that pulsed like heartbeats. Layla knew she hadn't escaped that night. She had been chosen. It wasn't long before she found others. Not many. Just 1 or 2, strangers in diners, someone muttering on a train, a janitor who left cryptic notes under her apartment door. People who saw the rot beneath the wallpaper of reality. People who had brushed against the creatures that wore smiles like masks. They called themselves the Severed. Survivors of encounters with the other ones. None of them whole anymore. but all of them certain of one thing: something was coming. Something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. They had theories, half-formed, paranoid, desperate. Some believed this was a slow colonization with towns being overwritten one by one. Others thought the creatures were hunting for something, or someone. Layla didn't know what to believe, but she felt the pressure building. A tension in the seams of the world, and in her bones. She began her own investigation. Not online, that was already compromised. No, she went analog. Libraries with old basement archives. Forgotten maps. Handwritten letters tucked into books that hadn't been checked out in decades. Patterns began to emerge. Disappearances in clusters. Families with no digital footprint beyond a certain year. New neighborhoods that appeared overnight, fully populated. And always, a name scratched in the margins: the Weaver. Some said it was their leader. Others whispered it was a place, or a god, or maybe a machine. But Layla knew in her gut, whatever the Weaver was, it was watching her now. Waiting. Testing. One night, while studying the book she had stolen from the miller's house, its pages now stained and brittle, Layla saw something she had missed before. A diagram. Not quite a map, not quite a ritual, but something in between. Instructions maybe. A key. It would take everything she had left. Her safety. Her sanity. Maybe even her soul. But if she followed it, if she dared walk the path hidden in those symbols, she might be able to stop it. Or at the very least, warn the world. She packed her bag in silence. Just a notebook, a flashlight, the book, and a ring her grandmother had once given her, the one that always felt warm even in the cold. Layla didn't know where the path would lead, only that she had to walk it, because the rot was spreading, and she was the only one still awake enough to see it. The first step on the path wasn't a place, it was a moment. Layla didn't realize that until much later, after she had walked miles through fog-heavy forests, after the dirt roads had vanished behind her without sound, and the sky began to look less like sky and more like a thought someone else was having. She had followed the strange markings from the book, first across maps, then on crumbling tombstones, old rail lines, and finally, into silence. The air felt different in that silence. Not cold exactly, but still, like a held breath. Like the world itself was listening. She had found the diagram in the book only days earlier. A spiraled pattern, etched between pages with no text. The lines looped like veins or roots, connecting points that made no sense on any earthly grid. But she recognized some of them. Her hometown. A symbol she'd seen on the miller's basement wall. A tree near the river where she once dreamed of drowning. It was a map of memories, but not hers alone. The path led her first to a forgotten cemetery on the edge of a town no one remembered. The gates were rusted open. Moss climbed over every headstone as if trying to erase the names. In the center stood a statue, a woman holding a child, but the faces were missing, smoothed away, as if time had given up on remembering them. It was there she saw the first tear, a shimmer in the air, not dramatic, just a ripple, like heat over asphalt or breath on glass. It pulsed once as she stepped near it, and then she was through. She hadn't moved, and yet everything had changed. The sky above her was still gray, but now it pulsed faintly with soft red veins, barely visible unless she tilted her head just so. Trees leaned away from her. Their leaves curled in upon themselves. The wind had a voice now, full, mournful, like someone crying underwater. Layla didn't panic. She had been preparing for this. She took out her notebook, flipped to the sketch of the spiral, and marked the first symbol in ink. One down. She didn't know how many to go. From there, her journey unraveled slowly, like a memory being retold by something that didn't understand human time. She found an abandoned farmhouse where the walls whispered secrets in a language she didn't recognize, but could somehow feel. She passed the town square where the statues wept black ichor in the moonlight. Once, she crossed a long stone bridge that seemed to stretch forever in both directions, its railings lined with empty shoes. She met others too. A man with glassy eyes who spoke in riddles and called her Threadbreaker. A girl with silver hair who hadn't blinked in years. A creature made of folded paper and shadow that only moved when she looked away. Each encounter added to the picture. She was part of something older than humanity, a struggle that crossed dimensions. These creatures, these weavers, weren't just colonizers. They were architects, builders of false realities. Layer by layer, they had begun to overwrite the real world, replacing truth with mimicry. Families, neighborhoods, feelings, all replicated, hollowed, replaced. And she, somehow, had been born in the thin places between their threads. The book, The convergence wasn't just a guide, it was a tool, a weapon, a tether to what was real. But its pages were fading now, literally vanishing the deeper she went, as if the knowledge it held could not survive long in places where the weavers ruled. On the sixth night, she came upon the tower. It wasn't made of stone or wood, not even of metal. It was made of memory. Each floor pulsed with echoes, childhood laughter, screams, prayers whispered in the dark. The air shimmered with unfinished thoughts. It wasn't tall, only 3 stories, but it stretched inward, deeper than logic could follow. At the base of the tower, a figure waited. Sarah. Or the thing that had once worn Sarah's face. But it didn't wear her face now. It had shed the mask like skin. What stood before Layla had too many arms, too many eyes, and a mouth that smiled around its body, not on it. Still it bowed. Little survivor, it rasped in a voice like shifting sand. You've come far, but you are fraying. I'm not here to join you, Layla said softly. I'm here to unmake you. The creature only chuckled. No, you are here because you were always woven into this. And then it stepped aside. The tower's doors opened on their own. What lay beyond was not light, nor darkness, but choice. Would Layla ascend and risk herself to destroy the anchor point of the Weaver's realm? Or would she leave, return to the fading world, and try to warn the last slivers of humanity still untouched? She stepped forward, her voice calm, her breath steady. I choose to climb. And the tower welcomed her in. The door closed behind her, not with a bang but with a sigh, like it was grateful she'd come inside. The silence was thick, pressing. Layla blinked and the world shifted around her. The room looked like a living room. Not just any, her living room from when she was a child. The yellow sofa, the chipped coffee table, the TV that only worked if you hit it on the side. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The air didn't move. The dust didn't fall. Time was being held hostage. She heard laughter. Her laughter. The child's. From the hallway came the gentle thud of feet. Her younger self, running in socks, squealing, followed by the faint shuffle of her mother. The scent of popcorn, bubblegum, and fabric softener. It all washed over Layla like a warm bath, and she nearly forgot. Nearly. But then the faces. They were wrong. Frozen, smiling but hollow. Her younger self's eyes were glossy, vacant. Her mother's grin stretched too wide, like it had been carved there. Layla didn't move. She couldn't. Then her child self turned and spoke. Stay with us, Layla. It's safe here. No more running. The voice echoed too long in the small room. The walls trembled. Layla felt her fingers tremble too, but she reached into her coat. The book, the last few pages still solid, glowed faintly with blue ink. She whispered one word under her breath. This is not real. The walls cracked. Not with sound, but with memory. The image of the room peeled back like wallpaper soaked in water. Beneath it was not fire or rot, but emptiness. Space. Raw, unfinished space. Waiting to be shaped. She walked forward, straight through the image of her childhood. It collapsed behind her in a sigh of dust. The door to the second floor appeared without fanfare. Just a wooden frame. No wall. No hinges. She stepped through. This time it wasn't a room. It was a hall of mirrors. Thousands of them, stretching in all directions. But none showed her reflection. Instead, they showed versions of her. In one, she wore a wedding dress, smiling. In another, she sat behind a desk in a sleek office, her name on a plaque. In yet another, she stood in a dark alley, shivering, barefoot, eyes wild. Each version flickered, then turned toward her in unison. Which one are you? They whispered. Layla clenched her jaw. I'm the one that remembers. They laughed. A memory cannot hurt us. But Layla wasn't trying to hurt them. She stepped closer to one of the mirrors and pressed her hand against it. The version of her on the other side did the same, a perfect mimic. But Layla smiled softly. You are not me. You're who I could have been. She tapped the glass. The mirror shattered. The sound didn't echo. It absorbed. One by one, she touched the others, each time gentler than the last. With every break, the hall grew darker until only one mirror remained. This one didn't show a version of her. It showed now. Her. Tired. Fraying. But still moving. Still herself. She stepped through it, and the second floor was gone. There was no door this time. Only breath. Warm. Damp. The air hummed with low vibrations like standing too close to a speaker turned all the way down. The space was organic. Living. Walls pulsed. Veins glowed faintly red and gold. Layla realized she was inside the body of something vast. Something ancient. The weavers had made a place out of flesh. Ahead the path narrowed. Teeth lined the corridor. Not bones, teeth. Gums slick and twitching. She walked anyway. At the heart of this thing she found it. The loom. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a magical relic. It was a chair. Wooden. Covered in thread made of people. Every person the weavers had copied. Every life they'd twisted. Their threads had been sewn into this throne. It pulsed with thought. And the throne spoke. "You came to destroy us, little needle," it murmured. Layla said nothing. "Sit and you may unweave us. But you must pay the price." "What price?" she whispered. "You will forget the real world. You will become the thread. Only by knowing illusion can you unmake it." She hesitated. To destroy the weaver's anchor, she had to lose her place in her own life. To become part of their world, to know it, speak it, undo it from within. Layla looked down at her hands. Scarred. Shaking. Then at the book. Its pages were blank now. Everything she'd brought with her, memory, tool, identity, had been used. All that remained was her choice. So she sat, and the loom began to unravel. Not just the world around her, but the false realities. One by one. Neighborhood by neighborhood. Faces melting into silence. Whole streets evaporating into ash. The weavers screamed, not in pain, but in confusion. They had been seen. And Layla, thread by thread, unwove them. And so, the loom unraveled. Not in a burst, not in fire, but in silence. A silence that stretched across the boundaries of reality like a slow, encroaching fog. Cities that were never real crumbled into dust. People who had never been born flickered like dying stars, and were gone. Streets emptied. Dreams faded. And the weavers dissolved, thread by thread, returning to whatever place had first whispered them into being. But Layla remained. Not as a woman, not anymore. She was thread now. A stitch in the world's memory. A careful knot tied where something terrible had once grown. She was woven into the bones of reality, resting between the fibers of truth and forgetting. Not alive. Not dead. Just there. And if you ever feel like your reflection lingers a little too long, or you hear your name whispered softly when no one's around, that's her. That's Layla. Watching. Unwinding. Holding the fragile pieces of our world together, so the seams don't tear open again. The world outside the tower moved on, unaware of the rot that had nearly swallowed it. People woke up with dreams they couldn't place. Buildings they passed every day seemed slightly off. A shop they could have sworn had been on the corner yesterday was gone. No rubble. No explanation. Just absence. But they didn't question it. They never do. Because forgetting is easy. It's remembering that costs everything. And beneath it all, deep in the earth where no light reaches, the roots of the tower still breathe. Slowly. Waiting for another mind to loosen. For another crack in the veil. Because nothing ends. Not really. It just sleeps. Like you now. So let your eyes close gently. Let the echoes of Layla's journey wrap around you like a blanket. And if you dream of her, walking the mirrored halls, whispering forgotten names, don't be afraid. She's on your side. For now. Layla was not gone. Not entirely. Though her body had unraveled in the final confrontation at the heart of the loom, something had held on, some stubborn tether between soul and story. A thread she hadn't cut. She wandered now not in the world but beneath it. Between folds. In the seams. Where forgotten moments collected like rainwater in the cracks of an old house. And it was there, in that liminal in-between, that she heard it. A voice. Not a whisper from the weavers. Not the groan of the rot. But something new. A child's voice. Singing. Off-key. Barely louder than breath. And she followed it. Across broken memory bridges. Through the hollow shell of an old farmhouse that hadn't stood in decades. Into a place that smelled of mildew, old paint, and something faintly coppery beneath the floorboards. The voice belonged to a boy. 10 years old at most. Small, thin, with scuffed shoes and a too-big sweater. He sat cross-legged on a patch of rug in the center of a room that did not exist on any map. He was humming to himself, and drawing circles in the dust. His name was Eli, and he could see Layla. He didn't flinch when she appeared, didn't blink when she stepped into the room like smoke curling in from a long-sealed chimney. "I knew you'd come," he said like they had spoken before. Layla didn't respond, not with words. But she felt something shift inside her. Like an echo reaching back. Eli pointed to the circle he was drawing. "They showed me this in a dream," he whispered. "The tall ones. With no mouths. Layla knelt beside him, her presence flickering like a failing light bulb. They told me you're broken, Eli said, but you're still sharp. That you cut things that aren't meant to bleed. A silence bloomed between them. Eli's fingers twitched. There's more of them, you know. The weavers were only the first knot. There are others. Down further. Meaner. They like when people forget who they are. Layla's form shifted, something unreadable in her gaze. She was listening. They're waking up, Eli said, and they don't like what you did. He looked up at her finally, eyes wide and far too old. They want you to suffer first. Behind him, the floor creaked. Not in response to weight, but breath. The house itself was listening. And from the shadows near the doorway, something moved. A long arm. Joints that bent the wrong way. Eyes, too many of them, opening like blisters along a wall. But Layla didn't run. Neither did Eli. He reached out and took her hand, the small, cold hand of a child who had already seen too much. We can stop them, he said. They're scared of stories. Layla, who had once burned the loom with her grief, now turned her gaze to the thing in the doorway, and she smiled. A quiet, razor-thin smile. Because yes, stories cut. And she was still very sharp. Of course, let's drift back into the dark with Layla and Eli. The house had grown silent again. But it wasn't the kind of silence that meant safety. No, it was the deep, breath-held stillness that settles over the woods just before a storm. Heavy with tension. Alive with watching. Layla and Eli stood side by side, two silhouettes against the slow-rotting walls of a house that should not exist. The thing at the doorway had melted away, sliding back into whatever fold it came from, but they both knew that wouldn't be the last of it. They're listening, Eli whispered. Layla didn't speak. She didn't need to. She could feel them too, like static rising behind her eyes. Eli reached into the folds of his sweater and pulled out a book. It was small, the cover warped by damp and age. Layla recognized it at once. The same book she had found all those nights ago in the Miller's study. The Convergence, a guide to interdimensional colonization. But this one was different. Its pages pulsed faintly, like veins. They gave it to me in the dream, Eli said. But I don't think they meant to. He opened the book. Its pages moved on their own, flipping like wind-blown shutters, until they landed on a page covered in scrawled diagrams and strange fungal script. Beneath it, a phrase repeated over and over in English. To sever the thread, one must first follow it to its origin. Layla placed her hand on the page. Her fingers trembled, not from fear but recognition. She remembered now. Before she was taken. Before the Millers. Before the loom. She had followed a thread too. One night, long ago, as a child barely older than Eli, she had wandered into the woods near her home. Something had called to her. A humming. A warmth in her chest. She followed it deeper and deeper, and somewhere along the way she forgot the path back. The weavers hadn't made her. They'd found her. And shaped what was already broken. Eli stared at her. You heard it too, didn't you? He asked. Layla nodded slowly. We have to go back, she said, her voice hoarse and used. Back to where the first knot was tied. Eli didn't hesitate. He closed the book, and the house around them shuddered, as though trying to keep them in. But it was too late. The decision had been made. Together they stepped outside. But the world beyond the door was no longer the suburb Layla remembered. It was twisted now. Street lamps stretched like reaching fingers. Houses leaned toward them, too interested. Windows blinked. And the sky, oh the sky, hung low and wet like bruised flesh, pulsing softly with something that might have been breath. They walked hand in hand, Layla and Eli, following the thread that only they could see. A faint shimmer in the air, like heat above asphalt, winding its way through this dream-sick world. The deeper they went, the older the surroundings became. Trees emerged, gnarled and leafless, bones of a forgotten forest. The scent of damp soil and ash hung thick in the air. They were returning to the place before memory, before language, to where the first crack appeared between worlds. And they weren't alone. Shadows stalked them from the edges, too thin, too long, whispering in voices that didn't match their shapes. Some cried like children. Others spoke in riddles. One simply repeated Layla's name over and over, as if trying it on like a stolen coat. But Layla didn't flinch. She was beyond fear now. She had come undone and woven herself back together. And now, alongside the boy who shouldn't exist, she would find the first knot and cut it clean. Even if it meant unraveling everything. They walked for what felt like hours. Or maybe it was days. In this place, the sun never truly rose, and the moon hung shattered in the sky like a broken eye. The thread guided them, gleaming faintly, sometimes vanishing, only to reappear with a pulse, beckoning them forward. Layla felt it tug in her bones. Eli, still clutching the book, began to hum softly. Not a tune exactly, but a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to match the vibration of the earth beneath their feet. It comforted her, in the way distant thunder can feel like company when you're alone in the dark. Eventually, the trees opened into a clearing. But there was nothing natural about it. The ground was made of stitched flesh, the sky above it swirling with memories not their own, scenes flickering like broken film. A woman screaming into a well, a child standing motionless in the rain, teeth forming beneath skin. And in the center of it all, the knot. It wasn't made of rope. It wasn't made of anything human. It was a twisting, breathing mass, tendons and silk and shadow, all coiled into a shape the mind wasn't meant to grasp. Around it stood the weavers, tall, faceless, draped in cloaks that moved even when the wind did not. Their hands, too many fingers, too much silence, hovered above the knot like priests before a sacred flame. Layla didn't speak. She stepped forward. The weavers didn't move. They simply watched. And then, one of them stepped aside. They were letting her in. Eli clutched her arm. "Are you sure?" "No," she whispered. "But I have to." She approached the knot, the hum of it filling her ears. It pulsed once, then again, like it was breathing with her. She reached out, and as her fingers brushed the first thread, it screamed. Not out loud, not in the air, but inside her. It poured its memories into her skull like smoke into glass. She saw things she wasn't meant to. Endless rows of houses, identical and hollow. Children with their faces rearranged. Men and women dressed as humans but filled with teeth, cogs, mold. Whole towns that woke up wrong. And then, beneath it all, the first cut. The original tear between worlds. A mistake. An invitation. Layla gasped. She stumbled back, clutching her head. Eli caught her before she fell. "They didn't invade," she choked out. "We called them. A long time ago. Some ritual, some desperate plea. We opened the door." Eli frowned. "So how do we close it?" Layla looked at the book, then at the knot. "We don't close it," she said. "We unmake it." The weavers began to stir now, like wasps from a nest. Some hissed, some wept, but none moved to stop her. She opened the book, flipped to the final page. It was blank, until it wasn't. Words bled onto it, black and alive. The thread ends with the weaver who remembers being human. Layla looked down at her hands. They shimmered. Not flesh. Not anymore. But she smiled, because she finally remembered. The girl in the woods. The call. The thread. She was one of them. But she had chosen to come back. To unweave. So she tore the page out, placed it into the knot, and whispered a word she had forgotten long ago. A name, maybe. Or a goodbye. The knot unraveled like smoke in the sun. The sky cracked open, and the weavers began to vanish, one by one, unraveling with quiet sighs. Eli screamed as the ground gave way beneath them. Layla didn't. She closed her eyes, and let the thread pull her home. The fall felt endless. Not like dropping from a height, but like being unwoven, strand by strand, until all that remained was thought. Memory. Dread. And then, it ended. Eli gasped awake on cold concrete, damp with something that smelled metallic and old. The sky above him was ordinary. Gray. Overcast. No split moon. No whispering woods. No knot. He sat up slowly, heart thudding in his chest like a caged animal. Around him, buildings loomed, familiar but wrong. Like a stage built for a play he hadn't auditioned for. The town square was empty, its fountain trickling a little too red. Bicycles leaned against fences. Windows stared blankly. And there was no sign of Layla. He called her name. Once. Twice. Nothing. But he wasn't alone. A child stood at the edge of the fountain, back turned, hair hanging limp and soaked. Slowly the child turned. Smiled. Not like a person, but like a mask stretching. "You came back," the child said, though its voice sounded ancient. "Where's Layla?" Eli asked, backing away. "She stayed," it said. "She had to." "Why?" "She was the thread," it said simply. "You were just the needle." Eli's blood ran cold. "You brought her here," the child said, stepping forward. "You showed her the crack. You let it see her." Eli shook his head. No, she found the book. She found the thread." The child giggled, a wet, slithering sound. "You think books find people? Or do people find books already meant for them?" Eli's knees gave out. He sat, right there on the ground. The child sat beside him. folding its legs like a puppet with invisible strings. "Do you feel it?" it asked. "The hole she left behind?" He did. Like something had been pulled from the center of the world. A warmth, a weight, the truth. "She didn't destroy it," the child said gently. "She became the lock." Eli looked at his hands, still human, but trembling. "Will it stay closed?" he whispered. "For now," the child said. "But you'll keep watch." "Why me?" The child tilted its head. "Because you're the only one who remembers." Behind them the sky flickered. Just once. Like a blink. Or a warning. And in the distance the sound of children laughing. Too many. Too close. Too wrong. Eli stood up. The book was gone. The knot was gone. Layla was gone. But the story? The story was just beginning. Because not every thread stays tied. And not every door stays shut. Especially when no one else knows it was ever opened. It began subtly. At first Eli thought he was imagining it. A feeling like static beneath his skin. Street lamps flickering at odd intervals. The local news reporting strange animal sightings. Deer with too many eyes, birds that didn't blink. People brushing past him on the sidewalk would pause, frown, sniff the air like something was off, then shake it off and keep walking. They didn't remember. But something did. Eli lived simply now. A small apartment above the abandoned bookstore. The one Layla had first gone into. No one else seemed to notice it had ever been opened. The sign above it, "The Way Between," was faded to nothing, and the windows stayed shut, layered in dust that never settled. Eli swept the floors. Lit candles. Read what remained of the margins Layla hadn't taken with her. And each night when the town fell quiet, he would listen. Not for sounds, but for absence. The places where silence grew too deep. Where the quiet bent around something rather than simply being. That's where the knot brushed up against the world. It was different now. No longer a swirling hunger beneath the surface, but something curious. Watching. Waiting. Still learning the shape of things. And Eli was its reluctant translator. It spoke to him. Not in words, but in dreams. Memories not his own. Images of other towns. Other threads. Other locks and keys and people who almost understood what they were standing on, what they were breathing in. He started keeping a journal. Little sketches. Scrawled warnings in the margins of his own thoughts. Like, "The pine trees have teeth now, don't look too long. If the milk curdles before the expiration date, burn it, don't pour it out." The postman's shadow came an hour before he did. The town didn't notice. People kept going. Grocery stores. PDA meetings. Garage sales. But Eli noticed the rot. Not of the flesh, but of normalcy. Reality fraying at its edges. And then came Lena. She wasn't from the town. He knew it the moment she stepped off the 307 bus. She moved differently, eyes scanning the space between things. Like Layla had. She walked into the diner and ordered tea with honey and salt. No one blinked. No one but Eli. He watched her stir it. Once clockwise. Twice counterclockwise. Pause. Then once more clockwise. A warding ritual. Ancient. Subtle. She knew. After midnight, she came to the bookstore. Didn't knock. Just stepped through the door that wasn't supposed to exist and sat across from Eli like she'd been expected. "You're the watcher," she said simply. "I didn't choose it," he replied. "No one does," she smiled. "We're chosen. By what we survive." They didn't talk much after that. Just sat. Shared silence like an offering. But when dawn came, Lena left him a single thing. A brass key. Small. Unmarked. Cold. "Not for opening," she told him as she left. "For remembering." He never asked her what that meant. Because deep down he knew. One day the knot will stretch again. One day the crack in the world will widen. And when it does, it won't be screaming or chaos or blood that announces it. It'll be something far quieter. A house with one too many chimneys. A mother who doesn't blink when the power goes out. A lullaby hummed by lips that never learned the tune. And on that day Eli will reach for the key. Not to fight. Not to flee. But to warn the next thread. Because monsters don't always wear teeth and claws. Sometimes they wear familiarity. Sometimes they wear us. She didn't know how long it had been. Time passed differently now. Not in hours or days, but in echoes. Each step she took echoed across versions of herself she had never lived. Memories that didn't belong to her flickering behind her eyes like lightning behind storm clouds. Layla had slipped fully into the place between. She hadn't meant to. Not at first. But the moment she tore through the heart of the Miller house, clutching that ancient book, whispering words in a tongue her mouth wasn't made to speak, she had unstitched something. A veil. a border, a promise, and it had answered. The knot did not devour her. It invited her, because Layla had seen too much, survived too much, and that made her valuable. She was no longer a girl running from monsters. She was the map they drew their futures from. But she hadn't forgotten who she was. She carved symbols into tree bark in places no tree should grow. She whispered her name into cracks in the earth. She made rules, anchors to keep herself from being remade completely. Never eat anything warm. Never look at reflections too long. And never, ever answer a voice that sounds like your mother. Her journey was no longer about escape. It was about infiltration. The knot had spread, yes, but it wasn't perfect. It had weaknesses. Patterns it repeated in every mimicry of a town, every false family, every smiling child with hollow eyes. Layla learned those patterns. She learned the lullabies they sang to keep their young asleep. She memorized the structure of their false homes. Always 4 chairs at the dinner table, never 5. Always a family photo without shadows. Always a basement that was locked, but not with keys, with belief. And slowly she began to infect them. Not with weapons, but with doubt. A misplaced fork here. A window cracked open when no one remembered doing it. A message scratched behind wallpaper in human handwriting. I see you. She was careful. Too much too soon and they'd notice. Adapt. But Layla was patient. One by one she made her mark on the folds of the knot. She wasn't alone either. Through the fog of unreality she felt others like her, flickers of resistance. People who had slipped through the cracks and refused to forget. People like Eli, maybe even Lena. Scattered across the seams, holding on to what made them them. They didn't speak. Not with words. Not yet. But their presence was a rebellion. And deep within the knot, something noticed. A ripple. A flicker. A twinge of something alien to its purpose. It wasn't fear, it didn't know fear. But it knew change. And that was dangerous. Layla could feel it stirring now. The knot shifting focus. Turning its countless eyes inward, trying to find the rot in its tapestry. Trying to locate her. But she was already moving. Always just ahead. Like prey once. Now predator. And on the inside of her palm, the sigil she'd carved months ago burned faintly, guiding her toward the next fissure. The next moment of weakness. The next seed she would plant in the name of unraveling. Because Layla had a new name now. The thread cutter. And she wasn't done yet. It began with a dream. Or rather, a memory that wasn't theirs. Lena jolted awake first, drenched in sweat, heart thudding in her chest like a warning bell. The motel room around her felt too still, like even the dust had been holding its breath. On the edge of her vision, shadows curled too slowly back into place. She looked across the room. Eli was already sitting upright in his bed. Well, eyes wide and unfocused. You saw it too, Lena whispered. He nodded once. The movement was tight, controlled. Like if he moved too much, something would unravel inside him. They didn't need to describe it. They'd both seen it. The same hallway. The same flickering overhead light. The same girl, Layla, walking barefoot across a shifting floor that looked like it was made of old memories. She had looked straight at them. Not in the dream. Through it. As if she'd sent it. No. As if she had delivered it. She's alive, Lena said, her voice steadier now, spine straightening like a current had moved through her. More than that, Eli replied slowly. She's inside it. Whatever it is. They both fell quiet. The motel clock buzzed faintly in the silence, counting out time that no longer felt real. Since the night at the Miller house, since the rot spread and the police forgot, and the neighbors waved with glassy smiles, they'd been drifting, clinging to logic, collecting scraps of truth like stray coins. Lena had filled 3 journals with notes, drawings, timelines, names of families who smiled too much, towns where the air felt like syrup, places where street signs looped back into themselves. And still, nothing had felt certain. Until now. Layla had shown them what certainty looked like, and it burned. We have to go back, Lena said. Eli didn't answer right away. He got up, walked to the desk, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the book, the Convergence Manual, the one they'd stolen when no one was looking, the one that had whispered in his sleep. Its pages shifted again now, curling as if aware of their choice. Words bled through the margins in a script neither of them had written. Gate opens beneath the memory of the lake. Lena didn't need more. She was already packing, already moving, already tracing Layla's path backwards like Ariadne following her own thread. Because now they had a mission. Layla was inside the knot, alive, and more dangerous than ever. But she wasn't coming out. Not yet. So Lena and Eli would go in. Not to rescue her, but to fight beside her. Together they would burn the rot from the inside. The woods surrounding the knot did not begin as something unnatural. Not at first. The trees grew dense and ancient, their trunks gnarled and split like wounded flesh, and their branches tangled in impossible patterns overhead. The deeper Lena and Eli walked, the more it felt like time was folding inward. Sound faded. Even their own breathing seemed swallowed by the hush. Eli kept glancing behind them as if half expecting the forest to close up, sealing them in. Lena, always braver, always forward-focused, pressed on. She held the tattered pages they'd taken from the book, the ones Layla had found in Mr. Miller's study, the ones marked with symbols that twisted when looked at too long. They pulsed faintly in her bag like they were alive. "It's not just a place," Eli whispered finally, as though saying it too loud might wake something. "It's feeding. Off us. Off everything." Lena nodded but said nothing. She could feel it too. The rot wasn't just a smell here, it was memory. The path beneath them writhed with damp, moss-covered stones. Sometimes she thought she heard laughter, tiny, childish giggles, floating on the still air. But whenever she turned, there was nothing. They came to a clearing eventually, though it was wrong to call it that. The trees formed a ring, but they bent inward, their branches hooked together like a cage. In the center stood a house. It looked exactly like the Miller home. Every board, every window. Even the porch swing creaked softly in the same slow rhythm. But it was wrong. It was like someone had remembered the Miller house from a dream, or a nightmare, and built it from memory alone. The edges didn't line up quite right. The light bulb on the porch flickered in a heartbeat pattern, and the door was slightly ajar, revealing only shadows within. Lena stepped forward. "Wait," Eli said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photo. It was Layla, one of the only ones they had left. Her face was drawn, her eyes distant, but she was still there, still human. "We're doing this for her," he said, voice trembling. Lena nodded. "We are." Together they crossed the threshold. The moment they did, the air changed. Heavier. It smelled of copper and wet leaves and something sour. The interior of the house was worse than the outside. It was both too familiar and utterly alien. The walls breathed, slowly, like lungs. The floorboards pulsed with something just under the surface, like veins. A noise came from upstairs. A dragging sound. Something that knew they were here. But the pages in Lena's bag grew warm. The guide they carried wasn't just a manual, it was a map. A ritual. A trap. Eli reached for her hand. "If we find the heart of the knot, we can end it." Lena looked up the stairs. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but beneath that, resolve. "We will." And together they climbed. Above them, something moved. Something old. Something that remembered every face it had ever worn. And it was hungry. The stairs creaked beneath their feet, each step a prayer and a warning. The air thickened as they reached the top landing, the hallway stretching impossibly long. Paintings lined the walls. Faces that seemed to change when you weren't looking, eyes that blinked, mouths that twitched into knowing smiles. At the end of the hall stood a door. Blackened, warped, humming faintly with a pulse that matched their own. This was it. The heart of the knot. Lena pulled the final page from her satchel, the one marked with a seal neither of them could read. The moment she touched it to the door, the wood cracked with a scream that wasn't sound but memory, and the door fell open, revealing a child's bedroom, but not a human one. The bed was stitched from vines and bone. The toys on the floor twitched, muttering in tongues made of sighs and wind. And in the corner, curled in sleep or perhaps waiting, was the source. The rot, the knot, the imitation of innocence that had been feeding on towns, memories, and lives for years. Eli stepped forward, voice steady. "This ends now." Lena placed the page on the floor, whispered the words Layla had written in the margins. The light in the room flickered, twisted, and then silence. The room was empty. And then, so was the house. Outside, the trees unraveled. The knot loosened. The pressure in the air lifted. The mimic homes began to dissolve into ash and dust. The sky cleared. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had broken the cycle. They returned to Layla, who waited by the edge of the woods, her eyes brighter now, her voice no longer echoing with static. Whatever pieces of her had been taken, twisted, they were beginning to knit themselves back together. Not all battles are fought with blades or bullets. Some are fought in silence, with trembling hands and quiet defiance, against things too old to name. And though the knot had been undone, they knew it wasn't the only one. But for now, for tonight, the town was quiet. And somewhere deep in the forest, the wind sighed with relief. Thank you for listening. I'm the sleepy storyteller. May your dreams be strange, but your night be peaceful. And remember, if the faces in the photo start to shift, don't look too long. Good night, Crescent Moon.